Welcome back to another episode of the Seafarer Social Podcast. This is episode 7, and today I'm speaking to a good friend of mine, George. George and I met at a jiu-jitsu class. He lives in the same town as me, and once we got talking, I found out that George is actually a cadet who is studying at Warsash and has done his training on an evergreen bolt carrier, and is still in the process of doing his training now. And I thought this would be a really interesting guest to have on because, as everybody knows, the UK seafarer labour market has decreased over the years. And I'm very interested in finding out how somebody from my town, with a similar upbringing to myself, was found out about the Merchant Navy. And I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So firstly, thank you, George, for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Carl?
I'm great, mate. I'm great. So, George, let's get stuck straight in. So, can you tell me a little bit more about your background and how you first found out about the profession of the Merchant Navy, and what inspired you to start a career in seafaring?
Yeah, I grew up in a pretty coastal town near Portsmouth, so I was always about the sea. I was in the Sea Scouts when I was younger, so I used to go out rowing and sailing boats. So I thought, yeah, I was quite interested on being on the water. I had a career choice between the Royal Navy and perhaps the Merchant Navy, and I'd always been interested in commerce and how things worked. I studied engineering principles at college, which gave me an insight onto how global manufacture works, and it made me interested in container ships and cargo transport. So I considered the Merchant Navy. So I just tried to work out how to join it. So I went online, and the first thing that came up was join Warsash College. So I went on to where that was. It turns out it was very local to me, so that was great. And I booked myself an open day there. I went along to the open day, and they showed me all the different careers I could have in the Merchant Navy, the benefits of it, sort of the lifestyle. They didn't give me all the details about the lifestyle, but they showed me what could be. And it all sounded fantastic. So I thought, yeah, I'll apply for this. And the process of applying is you have to find a company to sponsor you through Warsash to pay your fees for your education, and then you get placed on a vessel. So I did that. I was lucky enough to be placed with SSTG, who put me on an evergreen vessel. And yeah, I started last year, and I've had a good time since.
Fantastic. So, just to go back a little bit, so when you were at school and college, was the Merchant Navy ever brought up to you by any career advisors or anything like that? Was this ever something that was discussed?
No, not at all. And having been on board with other nationalities, I found that they had a lot more push in their colleges to join the Merchant Navy because they were what you would say seafaring countries, but so are we. So it's surprising that we wouldn't have more of a push for the Merchant Navy in our schools. We had a lot of push for the Royal Navy, but because the Merchant Navy is more of a conceptual organisation, it's not just one company. Like the Royal Navy is not a company, but one organisation. It was a lot easier to push forward the Royal Navy than the Merchant Navy. So I didn't hear about it at all. I had to see that there was boats going around the world and thought, well, how can I be a part of that? I went on cruise ships when I was younger, and I thought, yeah, this is a pretty cool career. How can I work on cruise ships? And the answer to all of that was join the Merchant Navy.
Nice. And in terms of, you and I are based in Portsmouth. We're very close to Warsash, very close to Southampton, major port, big maritime university. In terms of inspiration, I know you said you've always been on the water, but what was it that inspired you to choose Merchant Navy specifically over the Royal Navy?
Well, I spoke to a lot of people local to here, and everyone's either in the Merchant Navy or the Royal Navy, as you know. Speaking to people at Jiu-Jitsu where we met, and everyone seems to be associated with the sea. And I asked them, how's your career? What are the benefits? And the Royal Navy's got a great sense of pride for serving in the Royal Navy and for your country. I've always admired them. But the Merchant Navy gives you a lot more freedom of when you want to go away and how much money you want to earn. And there's a lot more volatile career path, which seemed to suit me. I could see myself earning a lot of money in the Merchant Navy, where I might not have done so in the Royal Navy. where I don't know. There's different benefits for each, but as I said, it wasn't really pushed that much. It's one of those careers you've got to set out on your own and work hard for your career progression. It's not just a natural progression promotion. So
Sure. And let's talk a little bit about your time at Warsash. I know you're still there. Technically, you're doing your first year, well, your first training year at sea with Evergreen, but you're still currently studying at Warsash. What's your experience been like up to now studying at Warsash? Talk to me about some of your teachers. Talk to me about some of your peers. How have you found it studying at Warsash, and how has that helped prepare you for your role at Evergreen?
Warsash is a great college. It's got fantastic technology. We've got access to Solar University, which is next to it, so we can go and study in their library with all their good computers and things. So that's great. The teachers are really good, although there is sometimes perhaps a language barrier because a lot of the teachers are international because they're seafarers who can speak good English from the sea, but perhaps in teaching some things are lost in translation. But on the whole, it's been pretty good. It's great having experienced seafarers be able to teach you, whereas if you went to another university or for example, my secondary school didn't have people in the industry talking about what they're teaching, but these people have got real experience. We had a class called General Shipping Knowledge, which wasn't anything in particular. It was just to get you prepared for sea, talk to you about cultural differences on board, different kind of ships in the shipping world. So you could go on the ship and you wouldn't not know anything about the business. How to handle yourself in certain situations, which I can tell you has come in quite handy because there are dangerous situations around the world, and it was nice to not be fully prepared, but to have an insight on what might happen and not be totally shocked by it. So it's fantastic, and the technology at Warsash is incredible. They have simulators, bridge simulators. The Royal Navy even use and come and train there, and lots of people from different nationalities come over and train on that course. Because it's fully immersive and it's fantastic. They can simulate anywhere in the world, any weather condition. Those are really cool. I haven't actually been able to use them yet, but once I go back to school, I'll have a go on them. But having been on the bridge of the container ships, I've seen them and they're exactly the same. So the technology is really at the forefront with Warsash.
Nice, that's really cool. And in terms of the other students you're studying with, are they predominantly English students as well, or do you also have international students coming from other countries?
They split them. So I do have a few people from different countries, but they live in England. So, they're English. But interestingly, there are some other cultures because they're from different countries originally, but they all speak perfect English, and those are my peers. But the international students are split straight away. And are taught differently. I haven't seen them since the open day, so I'm not sure what goes on there. But I do know that they have an efficient deckhand course, and a lot of people from India come and train on that deckhand course. So they do offer a wide range of training for different nationalities.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I've heard fantastic things about Warsash from not just British cadets and seafarers, but from seafarers around the world. It's one of those schools that are very well known within the seafaring community all around the globe. I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about what inspired you. Now, I know that you told me about how you spent time on the sea. You spoke to people within the area. Obviously, we're based in a maritime sort of area within the Portsmouth, Southampton region, and just generally on the south coast. But as I said to you, the decline in the UK labour market for seafarers has been going further and further down over the years. And I think I saw a statistic that in 2021, only 1.8% of seafarers were British. So my question to you is, given that statistic and the fact that shipping companies are choosing to hire more from other regions, and a lot of this is probably down to cost. It's generally more expensive to hire people from the UK because we have certain minimum wages and things like this. With that in mind, do you think it made the choice more difficult? And how do you think things will go moving forward in terms of the size of the labour market for British seafarers?
I don't think it made the choice more difficult because I wasn't aware of it at the time, I'll be honest. I knew that as everything in the world is being outsourced to cheaper labour countries, that's obvious. But English is still the language of the sea. Whenever we're in any country, we're on the British radio and people, they speak English. So it's very important to have English speakers on board. Of course, you're right that they are outsourcing to different countries because of cheaper labour. Fantastic workers, by the way. Having spent a few months on board with Filipino crew, they're fantastic. But I spoke to people, British seafarers, and they were all confident that there is still a demand for British seafarers, especially in more commercial side of like cruise ships or yachting. People with customers like to see English people about. I'm not sure why, but they do apparently. So they're quite in demand. And also our country is recognised as having good schools and good standard of education. So our flag, our British flag, if it's put on any ship, it's given more free passage into different ports than perhaps what they call black flag vessels, which might be taken more interest in. So yeah, there is still definitely a value to having a British offshore watch qualification. In fact, a perfect example of this is one of my teachers, Captain Alex Prokopik. He's from Argentina, or South America at least. Forgive me if he's watching, but he got his qualification there, and then went over to Spain and got his qualification in Spain, and then came here and he got his qualification here, and he's never gone anywhere else. His end goal was to work in the UK and have a officer watch qualification in the UK. Now he doesn't need that from the UK, but he got it because it's so well respected internationally, and it allowed him to get lots of jobs that maybe, even though he had the qualifications to get, they might not have hired him for. So certainly, maybe not British seafarers, but the British seafarer qualifications are very important, which is why you see people come over to train in Warsash that aren't British, because it's a fantastic college.
So those who, in terms of the pass rate, and then those who go to land a job at sea, when you study through Warsash, how many people then, like if you had to guess, how many people actually do bag contracts with shipping companies afterwards? Is it almost guaranteed?
Yeah, it's not guaranteed with the company you trained with. For example, Evergreen don't, as a rule, hire British officers. They like to employ foreign officers, as we've said. Companies outsource. But most of the people that train with their companies in this country do get offered a job if they've done well. But that qualification, Officer of the Watch Unlimited, which is what I'm working towards, it gets you in from really wherever you want to go. It's difficult to get into yachting straight away because it's so competitive, and it is also quite difficult to get into cruise ships straight away if you didn't train on cruise ships. So perhaps you'd have to do a few years on container ships or bulk carriers, prove your worth, and then apply on a cruise ship. But to answer your question shortly, yeah, a lot of people get in because it's a vocational degree, really. You learn the thing for that trade. You're going to work in that trade, and it's a difficult qualification to get as well. So it's an easily found employment, especially if you're British, I'm told. So that's great.
Fantastic. And what's the end goal for you, George? Do you eventually want to become a captain?
I'd love to become a captain. Having been to sea, I am evaluating my end goal, as everyone does. Your end goal changes in your career. I'm not sure that I would like to be a captain of a container ship. It's quite an interesting role, but I don't know if it's for me. I could work on board a container ship. I'm having a great time out there. But eventually, a cruise ship would be fantastic. I think because you can interact with the customers. They do public speaking on the cruise ship, which I would be greatly interested in. It looks like a lot of hard work, but it looks interesting. So that's a big goal of mine. But I recognise that most people, after being cruise captains or cruise chief officers, start a family maybe and start to work on smaller boats like tugboats or ferries or dredgers. where they can come home more often and be with their family. As I said before, Captain Alex, he worked on Queen Mary 2 as a chief officer, I believe, and then he is now the captain of the Isle of Wight ferry. So he downsized, but still used his qualification, and he also teaches at the university, so he can spend more time with his family and have a better life. Because it is difficult being away at sea, very difficult, but you've got to get through it to have a great career. So, yeah, I suppose that's the answer to your question. I would like to eventually end up nearer to home, but I'm ready to go to sea for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that every single seafarer I've spoke to who's elevated their career to become an officer has said that there has been, a tremendous amount of sacrifice,
Yeah,
and the fact that you recognise that so early on, I think, is really important, because you are right. Eventually, you are going to want to start a family, and if you can, do work that's closer to home, whether that means smaller ships, and like I said, there's lots of opportunities in the South Coast. I think that's you've definitely got the right idea there, but be prepared to spend 10 to 15 years of your life
yeah,
away from home, because that's just the reality, isn't it?
yeah.
Of
Well,
seafaring.
with the qualification I'm working towards, which is Officer of the Watch Unlimited, I could work anywhere in the world for any length of time, but it's not realistic to say, oh, I've got this great qualification, I'm going to go work on dive boats for the rest of my life, because although that would be paradise, you don't earn the money that you need to earn
Yeah, sure.
to sustain your life. So that sounds like a great job, and I might go and do that for a few years just to keep myself happy. But at some point, I'm going to have to work on 6 month contracts. But
Yeah,
you've
and
got to get through it.
I agree, and I think you'll do a great job. I definitely think one day you're going to be a fantastic officer. Just from the character you have and the time we've spent together, I really do sense a great officer for the future in you,
Thank you,
George.
George.
Um, my next question is: I've spoke to a few of the institutions and organisations in the UK. We've got the Nautical Institute, we've got the MRS, Institute of Marine Engineering, Science, Technology, and a lot of these institutions are, I would say, somewhat struggling to find a way of being able to communicate directly to young people. Um, how much do you know about these institutions, and what, if you are not already a member of them, what would make you consider paying for a membership?
We have had talks from MRS, at least I can remember, and Nautilus as well, a union for
Yeah,
seafarers. We had those talks as soon as we joined the university. Now, they were interesting, but I don't believe they were well placed, because all of us were just getting used to being in a new place and starting a new career, and we were sat down by some public speakers and told a load of information that we couldn't process at the time. So that's how they connected with the young audience. It wasn't fantastic. I joined Nautilus because it seemed like a safe thing to do. And Imerus had some interesting opportunities for later on in my career, saying about coming to formal dinners to network with very high ranking people. Now that's great, but I don't feel like we're welcome there at the moment. So maybe once I'm a second or a chief officer, maybe I'll do that. But at the moment, MRS haven't got much of an influence on my life. They had one talk, and that was it, really. So I haven't much to say on that matter, really. But perhaps later on in my career, I'll revisit them. They'll always be there, I suppose. But engagement-wise, I think they would do better to engage at the end of the cadetship. Maybe they do. I'm not there yet. Maybe they come back. But that's where the focus would be, I think, is when someone has their qualification and they can say, right, this is what I want to do. I want to network into getting this job. Therefore, I can join this organization, rather than saying to young people, as young as 16, you can join. Would you like to pay this a lot of money to go and speak to people that are 30 years older than you and are much better at the career that you're trying to get into? It's very daunting. So, yeah, I think at the end of the qualification would have been a better time to engage.
that's a really interesting perspective, because I think that you are right. I think there is a way that they could convey their message more continuously in smaller doses, perhaps throughout your whole time at Warsash, instead of just one big intro and one big conclusion.
Yeah.
Um, Out of interest, George, I know this might sound like a silly question, but there is a reason for me asking it. What social media platforms do you currently use most?
Just Instagram. I'm not on anything else apart from LinkedIn, of course. Um, so yeah,
And
just
what about
Instagram.
YouTube? Do you use YouTube?
Specifically, yeah, if I need to find something, I'll go on it, but not just browsing. No.
Okay. So when it comes to Instagram, out of interest, what sort of content are you consuming around seafaring?
I follow some fellow cadets on Instagram, not just from my school, but also international cadets. And then I also follow a few cruise captains because, as I said before, they're quite used to interacting with the public, so it seems like a natural thing for them to do to put a lot of things on social media. And they give a great insight into what life's like on a ship. I mean, they probably give a nicer insight than is real because they want to make it seem all great. But that's one of the reasons I want to become a cruise captain because I've seen a couple of things that this captain's post and it looks like a great career. But in terms of other cadets, it's also nice to see other people going through the same thing I am
Yeah,
and
sure.
see how they're dealing with it. They're obviously going to romanticize it as well. Being on Instagram, everyone portrays what they aren't, but at least I can see, oh look, I'm on a ship like that, and I've got these issues as well. Look how he's solving it. Even if it's bring a fan with you because it's going to be really hot, or make sure you've got something compatible with the Wi-Fi. These are just little things, but they can really improve life on board ship. Because it's all about morale when you're on there, and if you're bored, you can have a horrible time. But if you're not bored and you're keeping engaged, I found that was good. So
Yeah,
it's nice to see other people.
I totally agree. But what's really interesting there, I think, is that you spoke about the people that you're getting the most value and inspiration from other individuals that are providing content within the industry. But what about the companies and the institutions? Do you think that there would be more value provided by the institutions and by the shipping companies if they were to say create content that was aimed specifically towards seafarers and cadets that was only there to provide value, not a necessarily like a 1 hour recording YouTube video of a lecture or a new update about what's going on within their company. Say they did 60, 90-second reels that did exactly things like that. Just
Yeah.
so you guys know, bring a fan on board. It's going to be very hot sometimes. Like, do you think that if the institutions and the businesses and the organizations was to create content like that, it would make cadets like yourself more engaged?
It would, but inevitably they're going to advertise on the platform. I highly doubt that they would have something as great as that and just do that without any advertising spin on it. The Royal Navy, in fact, if I follow them on Instagram, and they do exactly that. They have a 60-second update every week, and they have a sailor, not an officer. They have Matt Lowe on board, and he just says what's going on this week and updates on the Royal Navy and what life's like. And I watch those every week. It's very interesting. I also take the Navy News, which is a magazine every week or every month, I believe. That I just read that and it's update on the Royal Navy. That is. There are merchant Navy magazines as well, but I wasn't as interested in those. It's quite interesting reading about the Royal Navy. So you are right. There's not that much engagement specifically from companies. Some organisations do. I think I follow Nautilus on Instagram, but
Yeah.
they just update things about their policies. They're not engaging. They don't help seafarers. The only people that help seafarers are other seafarers because they've got the experience in that sector and they post about it. Especially
Yeah.
in this digital age where people like to engage with other people and live their life through other people. If it were a company, it would be harder to connect with someone than an actual person there talking to you that you can relate with, maybe going through the same thing as you. So yeah, I find the most benefit out of other cadets that are posting, even my friends that are posting, and I think, oh wow, you're sailing around the Mediterranean, having a great time, having a beer at every port. That's something I'd love to work towards. It's good to see how people are getting on. I think without social media, my generation personally would find it very difficult to see how things are. I mean, generations before me didn't have it, and they got on great and probably worked, had a great work ethic as well. But if we weren't connected to other people, we'd certainly feel more isolated than perhaps the generation before us would have done, because we're so connected every moment of the day with other people at the moment.
That's such an important point, and I can't agree more. And I've found some fantastic pockets of inspiration from what we call seafarer influencers. These captains and officers and crew, ratings as well, who create fantastic content that inspires generations. And I just think, for me, my big message to the industry is that you should all be learning from organisations like the Royal Navy and your own labour market, because all of the inspiration that the next generation is getting is from the labour market. And there's a huge case study that, like the Royal Navy, who smash it out of the park. And both Merchant Navy and Royal Navy have the same problem. They're just not approaching it the same. Both of them are trying to get more people to apply. And everybody knows about the Royal Navy. But, I remember when we sat down around Christmas time for our jiu-jitsu.
I remember, yes.
Yeah, I remember when we sat down, you said to me something really interesting when we sat down for our Christmas jiu-jitsu party. And you said when you explain to people that you're joining the Merchant Navy, they hear the word Navy and immediately go, "Oh, you're joining, you're part of the military." They don't even know what the Navy, the Merchant Navy is, which is just mind-boggling.
It's because they don't advertise in schools. No one knows what they are. And as I said before, they're not one solid organisation, so you can't place it. It's like saying, I work in recruitment. I get on better if I say I work in shipping, because people understand what that means. But if I say Navy, that's attributed to the Royal Navy. So yeah, you're completely right. The way they're approaching young people especially isn't good enough, I don't think. Especially if we've got a decline in UK seafarers. They don't advertise enough at even as early as secondary school, because you can apply after secondary school. I never heard about it, not even in college. We didn't really have careers day in college though, because everyone's already chosen their individual career paths. People are studying specific subjects to go down one career path. So it would be weird to go, or do you want to join the police if you're taking something like health and social care? It would be a bit strange of a jump. And there's no nautical subjects at college, so they can't say, "Oh, we're going to get all these people on this course." But at least at secondary school, people have an open mind about what they want to do, so they could come in and say, "Would you like to earn loads of money? Here's the career to do it." I think that is the main drive for everyone. Everyone tries to hide it and be modest, but it is a main drive.
Of course.
There's no getting about that. It is a big drive. There are many other benefits to the Merchant Navy, but that is a big drive, especially why people join the Merchant Navy over the Royal Navy, because the pay scheme is just far better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you're right. There's so much that can be done at an earlier age. Get in these secondary schools and start flying the flag for the Merchant Navy at an earlier date. And I think the applications will go through the roof, because I know that there are, I've got younger brothers myself who are teenagers, and the generation, your generation and those below. There's so many people out there that just have absolutely no idea what they want to do. And that's okay. That's okay. I was one of those people at one point as well. And sometimes you fall into things and sometimes you find inspiration. But it's industries like maritime and the Merchant Navy that can help inspire the youth sooner. And I think you're right. Getting into those secondary schools, and for me, a big thing, like I said, is creating digital content. Because actually, I've found so many people nowadays who have started a career because of something they saw on television, or because of a movie they watched, or my brother started watching some veterinary TV show, and now he's obsessed with wildlife and studying wildlife at Barton Peveril. So it just goes to show you, that you can inspire you from an earlier age. And sometimes the best way to do it is not the way it used to be done, in terms of someone coming in on a table saying, "We are the Merchant Navy. We are the ones that make all of the shopping happen." and
Yeah.
sign to this iPad and we'll send you a newsletter. It's like, actually, that stuff is okay. And then give them a big load of printouts to walk home with. It's like that doesn't work anymore. No, the next generation, they don't find inspiration from that.
I mean, you'll know as well as I do, having a background in business, that the best way to tell someone what to do is not to tell them directly, because especially young people as well, they don't like being told what to do. So if they could be influenced through social media, people they trust on social media, because people trust social media, especially younger people than myself and my generation, in fact, instead of, as you say, sitting behind a desk, some old guy going, join the Merchant Navy. If there was more of a buzz about it at a younger age through social media, people would be subtly interested in it and think, right, this is my career choice, this is what I want to do, rather than being told what they want to do by someone else. But that is difficult to do, of course. But what I do know is people in my generation, and specifically younger than myself, all want to be millionaires as soon as possible. And they keep seeing people online saying, you can do that, just trade in stocks and you're going to be fantastic, which of course is rubbish. But they want things instantly, and it's maybe a result of this digital generation. And I think if the Merchant Navy were pushed as a career path that earned you a lot of money quite quickly in relative to your life, in 10 years, you could theoretically become a captain. That might be an angle to push with young seafarers or with young people that might want to be seafarers, that might be interested in earning a lot of money quite quickly. And then they have to, of course, not just drive for the money, they have to investigate the career, but that might be a nice hook for people that age who at the moment have no idea what they want to do, and just think things will happen for them, which obviously they won't.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you're totally right. People from where we are from, money is a big motivation. We're both from a similar background, middle class British guys, went to similar schools, and I can tell you, that everybody I know wants to make money. But the problem we have in the UK is that there's such an array of choices, right? Whereas when I spent time in the Philippines, there isn't as many choices, and it's a national understanding that if you join the Merchant Navy, that's your best chance of becoming financially free.
Yes, I found that whilst I was aboard. They said, our houses are very cheap in comparison to yours, and we have a great life at home. Whereas in the Merchant Navy, people may not see that as such a financial freedom as being an entrepreneur or something. But there's, as you say, there's so many options in this country, but there aren't in other places in the world, which means those people are more willing to work in those careers because they haven't got any other option. I remember thinking when I was on board, I've got so many options, I'm so young, is this what I want to be doing? Which made it more difficult and made me want to come home and think, right, take stock of my life. But when you're somewhere else, maybe like the Philippines, as you say, the Merchant Navy is so big that they think, well, this is a great option, I'm going to do that, which of course this is. But as you say, all young people in this country, or people of any age in this country, are just given so many options, it's difficult to choose which is a solid one.
Yeah, for sure. But I still am a big believer that even if there's a vast array of options is awesome, because it means that there's limitless opportunities, and we're very lucky to be born in a country where we have that
Absolutely.
capability. But nevertheless, I still think that although the shipping companies, the industries, whatever, they have more competition to fight for the attention of the youth, I still think that you have to do something instead of just being dormant and hoping they choose you. Like imagine, I read a statistic the other day, which was really interesting, that like applications for like stockbrokers went up by like some crazy percentage after The Wolf of Wall Street came out. And why do you think that is? It's because all of a sudden millions of young people have watched this movie and they've gone, that's what I want. That's what I want to be. And I think that, and I'm not for one single second saying that we get Steven Spielberg to make a movie on the Merchant Navy, but there's more that can be done. And I think one of the things I've said, and one of the things I've learned, is that when you speak to seafarers, seafaring isn't for everybody. It's definitely not. It takes a specific mindset, And it probably is actually a similar mindset to those that join the military somewhat. I think there's definitely some similar traits. But I think that for those who do choose to become seafarers, it's an extremely noble career. And you are right. They should be advertising the fact that captains can make 15,000 US dollars, 18,000 US dollars a month, tax free. That is something that can happen. It's not easy, but making money is never easy. It's tough to get to that position. But you can have a good living where you see the world, where you make friends for life, where you don't have any expenses, because while you're on board, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you've got to pay for your Wi-Fi, your SIM, but all your food's covered. You're not paying.
Totally. Yeah.
You're not paying rent for a bed. And I'm not saying by any means it's luxury, whatever, but nevertheless, you have the opportunity to save money as well as earn. There's some great upsides to it. There's also huge downsides, and that's why it's not for everybody. But I think that that there needs to be more creativity and more advertising put in terms of content. I love the idea of. I remember speaking. I was recently at a maritime event in America, and I spoke to a gentleman that's at the head of many of the seafarer charities in the US, and he said to me, "I've always had this idea of creating like a Netflix series, getting all the shipping companies to put loads of money in a big pot." And then passing it to a creative production company and say, go make us a series on seafarers from around the world. And can you imagine like a Netflix documentary series with 8 episodes where one was based in the Philippines, one was based in Ukraine, one was based in India, one was based in the UK. And you see all of the upbringings of these individuals, you know, how they studied, the motivations, the sacrifices, then the time on board and the stories. You know,
As you say, there's big films that bring people in certain industries. The biggest films about the merchant navy are the Titanic and Captain Phillips at the moment. So one shows a ship sinking and one shows them being boarded by pirates.
Exactly.
So, you know, whilst that seems like a mildly exciting life, there's nothing about, as you're totally right, nothing about young people going in. They have that for the military in this country, though. They have... what's it called? Warship Life at Sea, which is about the Royal Navy and how they operate, and it's got documentary style on that. And then there's also one, I think it's called Squaddies, about the army, and it does exactly that, about how the recruits come through the army. And it's more of a reality show, but it's interesting. I watch it, and if I saw something I liked, I might join the army. So. You're totally right. If there were a Netflix series about seafarers, especially my generation, who are always on Netflix and always bored of things to watch, we might give it a watch and then think, oh, that's actually quite a cool career. But it would also be great for people who are already in the industry, such as myself, but are new to the industry, so I could see, oh, what's next season, and see perhaps what the next season in my life might be like. It would be, you know, a pretty great insight to see other people on a media platform.
And also, it would be great for those who've been doing it for years, because finally there's something that shows what they do, and creates admiration and recognition. Like you said, I remember watching the Titanic, and you see the captain of the Titanic, Edward Smith, and you know he's wearing his uniform. He's got his hat. He's got his trimmed white beard. He just looks so elegant, and you just think, wow, like that's the kind of guy I want to be when I'm older, you know.
Then he goes and crashes the ship. So that's
you're right. But nevertheless, it's still it's the figure of masculinity. It's the figure of elegance. It's the figure of class. I've been on cruise ships. And the guests, they pay thousands of pounds to have dinner with the captain. That's a huge honour. You know, everywhere that individual walks around, there is just a presence. And nowadays, we even have some of the most amazing female captains. In fact, the most famous seafarer influencer on Instagram is a lady called Captain Kate McHugh. I'm sure you've heard of her.
That's the captain I was talking about before.
Exactly.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
She is fantastic. She's obviously captain of Celebrity Cruises. Interesting enough, I spoke to a gentleman on the podcast who was explaining that when Richard Branson launched Virgin Voyages, he actually offered Captain Kate a contract to become captain of his vessel, and the reason being is obviously
I can see
fantastic
why.
captain,
Yeah,
because she's got hundreds of thousands of people
yeah,
that watch her, and those hundreds of thousands of people that watch her can potentially be customers of
yeah,
your
totally.
product. So
There's
it's like,
a lot of money and influence to be made through actual actual workers in the industry. And as you said before about the Netflix thing, that would influence a lot of people, especially if it were sponsored by Maersk or something like that, or exclusively showed one type of ship. It would definitely have a grip on the people that are applying. And yeah, it's a fantastic business point of view is to have an influencer for yourself and market it around that. But I think one of the great things Captain Kate does is she's never biased towards celebrity cruises. She's just shows what it's like to be a captain on board, which is one of the reasons I follow her. If she said, "Oh, look how great celebrity are today," I'd just be like, "Yeah, it's just another advert." But it's that subliminal thing of right, this is a great career, and they're also still advertising celebrity, but subtly. So I think she's a great influencer for that.
yeah, I totally agree. I think whenever I work with a company, when it comes to maritime, I say we have to avoid trumpet blowing and just focus on value providing.
Yeah,
That is how, because if you provide value, eventually you click on the profile and you say, "Oh, what's going on here? Who's Captain Kate work for? Oh, Celebrity Cruises. Oh, wow. So Celebrity Cruises must be a fantastic organization because they have such a great representative in Captain Kate." Not once, like you said, does Captain Kate say you should come on board my vessel, but naturally that transition happens because of your respect for the individual, which is
I
just the
see.
basics of of social media marketing. And I just think so many companies within the shipping industry and maritime industry, period, struggle because it's just like, oh, we've been to this great dinner. Let's post a
Yeah.
picture of all of the men in suits and the women in dresses, looking great around this round table.
Totally right. It is antiquated the way they post, and if I, as a young person, see lots of men and women of an older generation at a formal dinner, I don't really connect with that.
Yeah,
At this stage in my life, I hope to one day, but if the target is young seafarers, what are you doing posting about old seafarers? Um, it's much more useful to see younger people on our screens, so we can actually feel like we could relate to them. Perhaps that would be much better.
totally agree. George, I'm conscious of time, so I'm gonna wrap things up. But one last question. I know you're obviously at the start of your career, but if you had to advise a 13, 14-year-old who has just heard about the merchant navy, they're interested in studying and eventually becoming a seafarer, what advice would you give to them?
I would say be prepared, do your research. I don't mean be physically prepared for the job. I just mean that, especially in training, you don't get much choice over what you do, and it is hard. Be prepared for that, and but research your future. I think the most important thing in a job like this is having an end goal, and you do what you want, and you do what you have to achieve that end goal. I personally would love to live in the south of England on a farm with my girlfriend and be able to spend a fair amount of time at home and then go off and work my job. And the only way realistically for me to do that is to work very hard for the next 10, 15 years on board ship, save up enough money to do that, and then work a few months on, a few months off contract so I can have a family and have a nice little farm in the south of England. That would be fantastic. But that is what drives me through the tough days of seafaring. That is what, when I'm isolated, I want to go home, and I think, what am I doing? That is what drives me through because I've got a goal. So my advice to someone young that is looking to join this career is, if you do decide to join, have an end goal and let it drive you through, because that's the thing that's going to keep you getting up every day and going on your watch. So yeah, that is what I would say to someone younger than myself.
And finally, George, if you were to give advice to your corporates of maritime and shipping, and you had all of them sat in front of you in a room, and they said, "George, you are the next generation. How do we communicate to cadets and seafarers that are your age and below? Because you are the future of our labour market. What advice would you give to those corporates?
I think in order to engage with my generation and future generations to come, you have to, like it or not, engage on social media because that is what people live their life by nowadays. So it would be good advertising to engage on social media, be more realistic with people, show real people's stories throughout their career, offer like Captain Kate at the end goal, but as far as to cadets of my age as well, going through the same thing, something we can relate to. And I think it's also important they engage in schools too, because I had no engagement in school with Merchant Navy, no advertising, no options for career paths. So if just a message in schools to say, hey, this career is available would be much better than what they're doing at the moment. Um, it doesn't have to be even from a company in particular, it could be from maritime organizations or just push it through a school curriculum, but not curriculum rather, but an open day or something like that. But to engage with young people, I think they're going to have to change how they're doing it because, as you say, the rate of British seafarers is falling. So something has to be done.
Thank you very much, George, for your time. It's been great speaking to you from a research perspective, from a friend perspective. And like I said, I really think you're going to have a fantastic career ahead of you. For anybody who's watching that might want to reach out to you, George, for research purposes or even career opportunities, where's the best place to connect with you?
You can connect me on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure that that's posted with this video. Um, and my email address is garmitage30@gmail.com. Thank you, Carl. This has been fantastic. It's been great. I've been watching your other episodes as well, which are really interesting and informative about the Merchant Navy. So that's great.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.